There is a fear that we all carry, a fear so primal, so visceral, that it transcends cultures, eras, and geographies. The fear of losing those we love. The fear of watching, completely powerless, as death snatches from our hands those who give meaning to our existence. It is a terror that lives deep within every significant relationship, whispering in our moments of vulnerability. What if I can't protect them? What if I'm not strong enough? Now, look at this image. Darth Vader, the icon of absolute evil. The most famous monster in the history of cinema. The personification of tyranny, destructive power, and unredeemable darkness. But here's the truth that few actually stop to process. The truth that transforms everything you think you know about this story. Vader wasn't born of hatred. He wasn't born of unbridled ambition or pure evil. He was born of love, or rather, of what he desperately believed to be love. Anakin Skywalker's journey is not just the story of a hero who became a villain. It's not just another narrative about good versus evil. It's something much deeper, much more disturbing, and infinitely more relevant to our own lives. It's a detailed and brutally accurate psychological map of how our best intentions, when fueled by fear and a desperate need for control, can transform us into exactly what we most fear becoming. It's a portrait of how the desire to protect can turn into destruction, of how love can rot into possession. In this video, we'll decode the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker through the lens of analytical psychology. We'll go beyond the surface of science fiction and lightsabers to explore the real psychological mechanisms that transformed the Chosen One into the galaxy's greatest tyrant. And in the end, you'll understand an uncomfortable truth. A truth that may make you rethink your own motivations. His downfall was not an accident of fate. It was inevitable from the very first moment. And the reasons why he fell, the psychological patterns that destroyed him, may be operating in your own life right now in ways you haven't yet realized. Before we understand how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, before we analyze his fall to the dark side, we need to understand his fundamental pain. The central wound that defined every choice he would make. And this pain has a specific name in psychology. Impotence, masked as power. Anakin Skywalker is presented to the Jedi Council as the Chosen One, the living prophecy that walked among them. He is powerful, extraordinarily talented, a Force prodigy who accomplishes feats that other Jedi spend decades trying to master. His abilities are undeniable. His potential is recognized by all. But here lies the problem. The contradiction that begins to poison his soul. No one treats him as if he were truly special. The Council keeps him on a leash, like a dangerous dog that needs constant surveillance. They deny him the title of Jedi Master, despite his power. They question his every decision, as if he were an impulsive child. They use him as a political tool to spy on the Chancellor. But they don't trust him enough to be honest about his missions. And here lies the first deep psychological wound. The resentment that arises when your potential is simultaneously recognized and denied. When you are powerful enough to be used, but not respected enough to be heard. It's the frustration of being seen as a valuable weapon, but never as a trustworthy person. How many times have you felt exactly like this? Powerful enough to make a difference in your work, in your relationships, in your life, but systematically held back by structures, by people, by systems that don't trust you. Competent enough to have your skills explored, but not valued enough for your opinions to be respected. Superficially recognized, but fundamentally undervalued. This is the psychological trap of partial recognition. And here's why it's so poisonous. It's worse than being completely ignored. Much worse. Because when you're ignored, you can rationalize that people simply haven't seen your value yet. But when you're only partially recognized, when your power is used but your voice is silenced, it fuels a specific and destructive internal narrative. They know exactly how capable I am, but they deliberately choose to keep me down. They fear me. They envy me. They oppress me. This doesn't just generate frustration. It generates anger. A deep and persistent anger that feels justified, even virtuous. And anger, when repressed day after day, meeting after meeting, mission after mission, transforms into something far more dangerous. Resentment. Resentment is fermented anger. It's the poison we take hoping the other person will die. And resentment is the first concrete step towards the shadow. The first rung on the ladder that descends into darkness. Anakin was not a naive and easily manipulated young man. He was someone with real power, genuine abilities, and true potential, systematically treated like a dangerous child who needed to be controlled. And this contradiction between recognized power and denied autonomy created the perfect wound, the exact psychological vulnerability, to be exploited by someone who truly understood human nature. Someone who had been patiently waiting for decades for the right moment. Enter Palpatine. But let's stop thinking of him for a moment as a simple science fiction villain, the bad guy twirling his cape and laughing maliciously. Palpatine represents something much deeper and more psychologically specific. He is the perfect embodiment of an archetype that Jung identified and that appears in mythologies of all cultures. The Dark Corruptor, or in more familiar terms of the archetypal structure, the tyrannical father who offers exactly what the legitimate structure, the true father, deliberately denies. Consider the dynamic. While the Jedi offered Anakin restrictions, inflexible rules, antiquated codes, and constant distrust, Palpatine offered unconditional validation, forbidden knowledge the Jedi kept hidden, and above all, power without moral constraints. He didn't just see Anakin's potential the way the Jedi did, as something dangerous to be controlled. He celebrated it. He encouraged it. He constantly whispered, "You're right to feel this way. You deserve more. They're wrong to limit you." While the Jedi urged Anakin to suppress his emotions, deny his fears, and stifle his attachments, Palpatine taught a completely different philosophy. Don't suppress your emotions. Use them. Transform your fear into vigilance. Transform your anger into power. Transform your love into something you can protect through absolute force. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the shadow is defined as everything we repress within ourselves. Our desires unacceptable to society, our anger that we have been taught to be ashamed of, our fears that we have learned to hide, our impulses that have been labeled as wrong or dangerous. The shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply unintegrated. And the healthy integration of the shadow, the process that leads to individuation and psychological wholeness, requires that we recognize these repressed parts of ourselves, that we understand them without absolute moral judgment, that we accept them as parts of our complete psyche without being completely consumed and defined by them. But here's the crucial problem. When the shadow is completely negated, as the Jedi Code fundamentally demanded of all its members, it doesn't magically disappear. It isn't overcome by willpower or constant meditation. It simply accumulates in the unconscious. It gains strength in psychological darkness. It grows distorted and monstrous precisely because it is never exposed to the light of consciousness. And when it finally explodes, when the dam of repression finally cracks under the pressure, it doesn't emerge integrated and understood. It erupts and devours everything, taking total control of the personality. Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side was not an integration of the shadow in the Jungian sense. It was exactly the opposite. It was a total and complete surrender to it, an absolute identification with everything that had been repressed. And the catalyst, the specific event that broke the dam? Fear. But not the simple fear of death, which all human beings carry. It was the fear of something much deeper, much more primordial to Anakin's identity. The fear of losing control. Because when you grew up as a slave on Tatooine, your entire childhood determined by the whims of a master. When you watched your mother die in your arms as she begged for you, utterly powerless to save her despite all your might with the Force. When you discovered you arrived only minutes too late. When every significant moment of your life was determined by external forces you couldn't control. There is only one thing that becomes absolutely sacred in your psyche. Never, ever, under any circumstances, to be powerless again. Never again to watch someone you love suffer while you can do nothing. And that desperate need, that psychological obsession with total control, is precisely what would make you the ultimate puppet of someone who truly understood how to manipulate that fear. Now we arrive at the absolute psychological heart of Anakin's tragedy. And here we need to make a critical distinction, a conceptual difference that most people don't understand, but that literally changes everything about how we interpret this story. The fundamental difference between true love and possessive attachment. Love, what the ancient Greeks called eros in its highest sense, or agape in its purest form, is expansive by nature. It genuinely desires the good of the other, even when that means accepting its own loss or suffering. It accepts the fundamental impermanence of all things. It courageously embraces the inherent vulnerability of loving something that can be lost, knowing that this possibility of loss does not diminish the love, but actually makes it more precious and more real. True love looks at the beloved and says, I want you to exist and flourish, even if that doesn't include my presence. Even if you leave me, even if you die, your existence has value independent of me. But what Anakin felt for Padme, despite the intensity, despite the sincerity of his devotion, was not that. It was fundamentally different in its psychological nature. It was attachment. Possessive attachment in the Buddhist sense of the term, the desperate desire to control, to ensure permanence in the impermanent, to possess definitively that which gives meaning and value to his existence. Listen to these words carefully. Really listen. I will not let you die. The grammar here reveals everything. It's not, I will do everything in my power to save her. It's not, I will fight with all my might against this. It's, I will not allow this to happen. As if Padme's life and death were under his personal control. As if she were an object whose existence he controlled, not a separate person with her own autonomy and mortality. There is zero acceptance of the reality that all living things eventually die. There is only the tyrannical assertion that his will overcome the fundamental nature of existence. And here's the insider knowledge, the insight that elevates this video from a simple character analysis to a profound understanding of psychological dynamics. The Jedi Code itself created this vulnerability in Anakin. The system that should have protected him from the darkness perfectly prepared him for it.
Jedi philosophy, in its essence, demanded the total repression of emotion and personal attachment. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. The logical conclusion of this chain for the Jedi was simple. Therefore, do not feel fear. Do not form attachments. Do not love in a way that creates vulnerability. Be detached. Be like stone, immutable and invulnerable. Cut the emotional roots that could be used to manipulate you. But here is the fundamental psychological problem that the Jedi either didn't understand or chose to ignore. Emotions cannot be permanently suppressed. They can only be temporarily repressed. And repressed emotions don't disappear into some psychological void. They fester in the unconscious. They intensify due to a lack of conscious processing. They create an internal vacuum, a psychological hunger that will eventually demand to be fed. The Jedi Code didn't offer Anakin real tools to process his fear of losing Padme in a healthy and integrated way. It didn't offer a safe psychological space for anticipatory grief, for honest emotional vulnerability, for the gradual acceptance of the impermanence of all things. It didn't offer wisdom on how to love without possessing, how to care without controlling, how to accept the mortality of those we love. It offered only a simplistic and psychologically impossible order. Don't feel, cut off attachment, deny emotion. And when you systematically forbid someone from processing their deepest, most primal emotions, when you enforce repression instead of teaching integration, you make them extraordinarily vulnerable to any alternative philosophy that promises not only permission to feel those forbidden emotions, but real power to control them and use their consequences to their advantage. It is precisely here that Palpatine enters with surgical precision. He offers no more repression, no more denial, no more rigid codes. He offers an apparent solution. The dark side of the Force did not promise Anakin that he would stop feeling fear, that emotion would disappear through discipline. It promised that fear would become his greatest weapon, that anger would fuel power, and more importantly, more seductively, it promised the specific knowledge and power necessary to prevent death, to control the uncontrollable, to make the impermanent permanent, to conquer nature through pure will. For a man whose central wound, whose defining trauma was helplessness in the face of loss, this was not merely temptation. It was literally salvation. It was the answer to the question that had tormented his soul ever since he held his mother's body. And he embraced her completely, without understanding that he was exchanging one prison for another, even more absolute one. And then we arrive at the moment, the scene that crystallizes all of Anakin's psychological tragedy in a single cinematic confrontation. Mustafar, the planet of lava and fire, a perfect visual metaphor for the inner destruction that has already completely consumed Anakin. At this point in the story, he has already crossed the point of no return hours ago. He has already massacred children in the Jedi Temple, looking into the eyes of young Padawans who trusted him. He has already sworn formal allegiance to Darth Sidious, kneeling and accepting the name Darth Vader. He has already executed the separatist leaders, completing the consolidation of the Emperor's power. And now Padme, pregnant with their children and desperate to the point of denial, comes personally to this literal hell to make one last attempt. She comes to save him, to bring back the man she loves, to reach whatever fragment remains of the person he once was. But watch what happens. Observe Anakin's body language closely, the transformation that occurs the precise moment Obi-Wan Kenobi appears on the ramp of Padme's ship. Notice how his face, which for a brief second showed genuine conflict, real doubt about the path he has chosen, instantly closes up. At this particular moment, Anakin's shadow, fueled by days of escalating paranoia, consuming fear, and rage justified by the Sith narrative, completely destroys his capacity for logical reasoning and perception of reality. Padme, the only person in the entire galaxy he sold his soul to save, is literally standing before him, pleading with tears in her eyes. She's saying she loves him, that she wants to run away with him, that she wants him to stop, to come back, to be who he was. But all Anakin can see through the distorted lens of his paranoia is betrayal. Lost control, challenged power, questioned loyalty. It doesn't matter that Padme clearly didn't know Obi-Wan was on the ship. It doesn't matter that she's obviously in shock when she sees him appear. It doesn't matter that all her body language communicates desperate love, not conspiracy. The shadow, when it takes full control, doesn't process information rationally. It interprets everything through the filter of core fear. And Anakin's core fear, now amplified to the extreme by the dark side, is the loss of control. And he attacks her. With the Force, he literally crushes the throat of the woman pregnant with his twin children. The woman he swore to protect above all else. The woman for whom he betrayed everything he believed in, massacred innocent children, and became a servant of absolute evil. At the moment when she needs his protection most, he becomes the source of mortal danger. This is the perfect, tragic irony. The self-fulfilling prophecy in its purest and most devastating form. Anakin's obsessive fear of losing Padme, the fear that motivated him to make any necessary sacrifice, leads him to personally and directly do exactly what will eventually kill her. His desperate and tyrannical need to control her safety destroys precisely what he was so desperate to control. He has become the instrument of his own worst prophecy.
And here is the immediate practical application you need to make right now while watching this video. Not later, not eventually, but in this moment of heightened awareness. What fear is operating in your life right now, which you are desperately trying to control instead of accepting and processing, and which is paradoxically causing or accelerating the very outcome you fear most? Is it the fear of losing a relationship that makes you possessive, jealous, controlling, progressively pushing away the person you so fear losing? Is it the fear of professional failure that paralyzes him into inaction, preventing him from taking risks and keeping him trapped in mediocre situations, because trying and failing seems worse than never trying at all? Is it the fear of being vulnerable, of being hurt emotionally, that makes you build ever higher psychological walls, creating precisely the loneliness and isolation you fear so much? Is it the fear of not being good enough that makes you reject opportunities before they can reject you, ensuring you'll never find out if you were truly capable? Anakin Skywalker wasn't destroyed by his love for Padme. That love was real. He was destroyed by his utter psychological inability to accept that some things, death, inevitable change, the loss that eventually comes to everyone, are fundamentally beyond individual control. And this refusal to accept the basic impermanence of existence, this tyrannical need to secure what cannot be secured, transformed him precisely into the instrument of his own complete destruction, the tool of his worst prophecies. But here's the question we need to confront. Did Anakin get what he wanted? In some perverse and horrific way, the answer is yes. He got exactly what he sought, just not in the way he imagined. Like Darth Vader, he finally has absolute and unquestionable control. He has power that no one dares question, authority that no one dares challenge.
No one questions him anymore like the Jedi did. No one underestimates him anymore or treats him like a child. No one limits his potential anymore or denies his worth. He is no longer anyone's political tool, no longer a pawn in someone else's game. He is the Emperor's right hand, the supreme enforcer bringing forced order to the galaxy through absolute brute force and systematic terror. And here's the truly tragic part. There's no more fear of loss, because there's simply nothing significant left to lose. Everything that mattered has already been destroyed by his own hands. There's no more acute emotional pain, because the emotions were literally charred along with his body on the lava shores of Mustafar. He never wanted to be powerless again. And now, as Vader, he has the power to destroy entire planets with a simple command. This is the Sith elixir in its purest essence. Absolute order through tyranny. Total power at the cost of all humanity. Control over everything external in exchange for the inner soul. It is the ultimate Faustian bargain, and Vader made it completely. Do you remember this image? The 9-year-old slave boy who built droids from scrap, who raced in pods at deadly speeds driven by pure dreams of freedom, who was so incredibly full of light, so connected to the light side of the Force that Qui-Gon Jinn, an experienced Jedi Master, instantly believed he was the chosen one of prophecy. The boy who literally carried the hope of an entire galaxy on his small shoulders. The boy who only wanted to free his mother and help people. Now look what he has become. Look what remains. A walking mechanical prison. Artificial respiration because his lungs were burned beyond recovery. His entire body sustained by technology because his flesh was destroyed. An empty shell, a black armor closing in around what used to be a human being. The mechanical hiss of the sealing mask, the first artificial sound of breathing, the yellow Sith eyes gleaming through the lenses. This armor is not merely necessary medical technology. It is pure symbolism. It is a sarcophagus for a man still technically alive. A walking coffin. The physical and undeniable manifestation of Anakin Skywalker's death. He achieved the power he so desperately craved, but the price was literally his own existence as a person. Anakin died. Only Vader remains. Each mechanical breath is an inescapable reminder of what he lost. Each heavy step of the armor is laden with the crushing weight of what he destroyed. Each glance in the mirror, if he still dares to look, shows the monster he has become. He wanted to control death. Instead, he became an undead, a ghost of his own choices, a haunting of his own mistakes. Eternally trapped between life and death, between man and machine, between Anakin and Vader. And there is no escape. There is no possible redemption. Only the constant hiss of his breath reminding him every second of every day of the price he paid for power. So, what did we really learn from the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker? What is the fundamental psychological lesson that emerges from this devastating journey from chosen one to tyrant? The lesson is not that love is dangerous and should be avoided. The lesson is not that we should completely repress our emotions like the Jedi tried to do. And it's definitely not that we should avoid caring deeply about something or someone to protect our own emotional safety. The real lesson, the psychological truth that Anakin exemplifies so brutally, is this. The road to hell is not paved with bad intentions. It is paved with the fear of losing control. Anakin Skywalker didn't fall to the dark side because he was weak-willed. He fell because he was too strong, too powerful, to humbly accept his own fundamental weakness in the face of the impermanence of existence. He didn't fall because he was inherently evil. He fell because he was absolutely desperate to do good, to protect, to save. He didn't fall because he didn't love deeply and genuinely. He fell because he loved in a way he couldn't let go of, couldn't accept as vulnerable, needed to transform into possession and control to feel safe. And the cruel irony, the devastating truth that haunts every step of his journey, is that every decision made to secure control, every moral compromise justified by urgency, every shadowy alliance rationalized as necessary, every act of violence defended as protection, made him progressively less free, less autonomous, less himself, until finally, sealed in that armor on Mustafar, he controlled absolutely nothing, not even himself, not even his own breath. Anakin Skywalker's fall was inevitable not because of some predetermined cosmic destiny or because prophecy condemned him. It was inevitable because he never learned, and the Jedi completely failed to teach him the most fundamental truth about human existence. You cannot control impermanence. You cannot defeat change. You cannot guarantee permanence in the impermanent. You can only consciously accept it. And in refusing to accept it, in the desperate struggle against the uncontrollable, you create precisely the suffering you were so desperately trying to avoid. You become the instrument of your own destruction. Anakin's tragedy is not that he loved. It's that he never learned the difference between loving and possessing, between protecting and controlling, between accepting vulnerability and fighting tyrannically against it. But now, let me leave you with a final thought that will set up our next video. Anakin Skywalker became a monster out of fear. Every terrible act, every atrocity, every betrayal stemmed from the human desperation to save those he loved. His monstrosity had an understandable, even tragic origin. There was an emotional logic to it, however distorted. There was humanity, even if corrupted. If this video made you reflect on your own repressed shadows, your own fears that you try to control, your own need for certainty in the uncertain, leave a like. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue this journey through the dark side of human psychology through pop culture. The question isn't whether you have a shadow. We all do. The question is, will you consciously integrate it, or will you let it grow in the darkness until it consumes you? Until the next analysis, and may the Force be with you. But more importantly, may awareness be with you.